All right, welcome everybody to the 1.8 release burndown meeting for Friday, September 15th, 2017. I am Jay Singer-Dumars, release team leader and meeting facilitator. And today we're going to go over the agenda as per usual, which is located at bit.ly/Kate's 1.8 release. And you can follow along after the fact there with all the notes and stuff we're going to talk about. If you could please sign into the document, that would be great, just so we know who attended. I just put my name in there myself. And we will get started. So what I've been doing in the last couple of meetings, and I think it works well, is just to go quickly over the timeline that we're at this week and then next. This week we have a really interesting conundrum that we need to sort out as a community and a group. I'm hoping that more people from the community will actually arrive because this is a pretty big discussion and it has a lot of implications for the 1.9 release as well. But essentially the question is, should we extend the freeze past this week into next? And what are the pros and cons of doing that and the risks and opportunities that that presents? So we're going to have a discussion about that in a minute. But before we go into that, I just want to mention that today documentation PRs should be all LGTM'd and ready to merge. I don't know if we have Steve on the line for giving us an update on that real quick, but or anybody from documentation?
He's on PTO today.
Okay. All right. Have you heard anything, Jennifer, quick about docs or status there?
I am afraid that I have not.
Okay.
I can, however, take a quick look in the docs repo and let y'all know if you would like that information.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd just love to know sort of if we're on track there or something's really kooky or not. So ideally, we'll have that done today, but we'll see.
Steve and I have been chatting, and he has not been wailing, so.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. It's a good start. All right. So without further ado, we're going to get into the extension of code freeze discussion. I want to point out that in the document, actually, let me share my screen so that we've got this in case for some reason you don't have the document open. Let me find it here. That did not work at all, did that? Let's try this again here. It's really weird, you know, Zoom doesn't let you share something on another screen. Let's try this. Okay, can you all see that?
Looks good.
Fantastic. Okay. All right. So what I did was I went and I played both sides of this argument out in my head. One wearing my ops hat and community contributor hat, and the other sort of the dev slash velocity hat. And put the arguments favor against and then some mitigating factors that might influence the pro or con on this. I also put a link to Mehdi's proposal, which is really basically saying that we need to fix this now and why, and that this is a recurring problem, not something that we could, that we don't have control over. So what I would say is, let's go ahead and review Mehdi's proposal first and go from there.
So this document I wrote was mostly targeted at the team if we decided to go with the extension.
Okay.
Have some writing that we can share with people. But I have a question before we go through this.
Sure.
If we extend the code freeze,
mm-hmm.
What is the implication on the release itself? What other steps are blocking by code freeze in release process, not in the development of the Kubernetes.
So in the 1.8 release process, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So what it means is that essentially we would have to, and I say we, but really it comes down to Adam having to continue doing daily fast forwards. It means that we have to keep a really close eye on people basically putting out of bounds changes into the 1.8 release, because that opens up more time for that to happen. I can't really, I mean, it means that people are working on other things that weren't planned for. So basically, these test issues are going to get a lot more play than they would have normally. So those people aren't necessarily doing things that might have been extended elsewhere. I can't think of anything else specifically for 1.8.
Okay.
Hey, Jason, this is Phil, by the way. I just dialed in.
Hi, Phil.
With respect to the having to keep a closer eye on the stuff that's going in, I was wondering if we could change the MungeBot to require the cherry pick required labels or anything like that anyway.
That's actually a really good idea, because in theory, whether code freeze is off or not, we should still be thinking of things as a cherry pick, even if we're doing fast forwards. That's great. So let me, how do I capture that? I guess somewhere here.
Would this be any different than having it require approved for milestone labels?
It's just another way to slice the data. Because approved for milestone is going to be in issues, not necessarily in PRs. So,
and it's good actually to say that this is a cherry pick, even if we are not ending code freeze. This is still considered to be a cherry pick.
Right. The mechanism through which we insert the code into 1.8 release branch is kind of irrelevant. If it's a fast forward or true cherry picks, it doesn't really matter. It's just the process needs to respect that. Okay.
I guess that makes sense as a test infra person. It's a little confusing because I think the cherry pick label is only used by the cherry pick incantation of Munge GitHub, not the submit queue version of Munge GitHub. And I think there was a PR merged recently to allow the labels that Munge GitHub looks at to block whether or not something gets merged to be passed in as a command line flag. But I see the argument that one label for everything maybe makes sense for humans.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in this particular instance, if we do extend code freeze, that this is going to be a very human-dominated time frame. So, which is unfortunate, but that's the world we live in currently. Okay, so the proposal. Let me go back to that. Okay, so just to frame this again, Mehdi, you're like this is essentially, if we agree to move forward, this is how we should be doing it, and explain what we did, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was my plan for this.
Okay, cool. So that actually that gives us a leg up in terms of comms to the community if we move forward with that. So let's go back to what I would love to do is, in the group of people assembled here currently, I would love to have someone who feels really strongly that we should do this, and ideally somebody that feels strongly that we shouldn't, because I want to have a discussion about this. And if I have to, I'll play the role of the person that's against it or for it, depending on if there's weight either direction. So is there anybody here who is against pushing this off until next Friday? I hate playing the devil's advocate.
I can help play devil's advocate.
Okay, yeah, we'll tag team the no on this then. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through the arguments in favor. Big one, first one is this happens every release. Retro after retro, this is a problem. Two, doing it now means more people available to work on it in theory. And this is a serious project stability risk. And during the leadership summit, it was called out that we need to be more driven by stability than feature richness. And I also want to add to that Philip's point from the other document, which is basically, well, this was supposed to be a stability release. The community sort of went their own way with adding a lot of alpha features. So now this is a point at which SIG release has an opportunity to do some course correction. My question on that, and we can get into this in a moment, is this really the right body to make that decision? Should we be widening the net to Contribex or to the current Bootstrap steering committee, or what does that look like? So that's an open question. We can talk about it in a minute. So other arguments in favor. I'm going to document these. Let them go. Let me know what they are, unless I captured them all.
Just one piece to add on that is that if this is not the right body to make that decision, it's still very possible that we as a community, bigger than just the SIG release, would feel the same way, that we do want to focus on stability still.
Right. And my question in regards to that, and this is again maybe a bit of devil's advocate, is this actually the right thing to do to move towards more stability? Or are we just taking an opportunity to clean up tech debt just like anybody else would?
I guess my thought on that is that, I guess, depends on how we're measuring stability.
Okay.
But if the health of the test is a metric you use in measuring stability, then I'd say that this is about stability in fact.
And just in terms of the tests that are failing, this was brought up in the release channel, but it's not like they're failing in a way that we understand what's wrong today. It's a huge known unknown in terms of whether this will pass once we get all the tests running. So I think it's hard right now to argue that this is stable. It's hard to argue for stability, I guess, is the main way of putting it, rather than arguing that we are unstable today, but just not having any insight into whether or not the current state of things, I think, is problematic.
Okay.
Just to be double devil's advocate, perhaps, if to that point, if we did a release and the tests weren't passing, and then we found out after we did the release that the tests actually were failing due to a stability issue, that would say to me that we did not fulfill our responsibilities in terms of paying attention to the signals for making it stable.
Okay.
Another argument in favor. I don't know if anybody has looked at downgrade testing yet. I'm just sort of representing, I guess, Merrick's perspective here. I went back and looked through the 1.7 release notes, and I couldn't find anything that talked about downgrades. It's unclear to me if we as an organization or entity made the collective decision that we're not supporting downgrade testing going forward, or we are, but it's only manual, or we are, and we've forgotten about that and aren't doing it. So is anybody looking at downgrades?
That's
No.
an excellent point.
Okay, so the reason I bring that up is I look at this less from the perspective of can we stabilize. I'm looking at this from a risk mitigation standpoint. You have the potential to lose a lot of trust and reputation if you put out something that breaks somebody's cluster really badly and they can't recover from it. And today, it seems like we don't have confidence whether or not regardless of whether or not there's breakage, whether or not there's a recovery path as well.
So I'm going to put on my devil's advocate hat for a moment. What guarantee do we have that if we extend this by a week that we're actually going to make a dent in that?
Yes, devil's advocate hat. You can't prove a negative.
Yeah, I think we definitely can't prove it. I think but it is somewhat in our control. Like, if we were really serious about that, we could say, okay, we have to do manual testing for downgrades. And there's probably a spectrum of stuff there. There's like, can I just downgrade the cluster and like the scripts don't fail, right? And like the API server still comes back up is like probably the lowest possible bar I can imagine for that. And then there's like more thorough due diligence, which is like, do deployments that we're running continue to function and services continue to work and all that sort of stuff.
So let me try and recapitulate what you just said. Essentially, if push came to shove, we could do some manual validations on this in order to try and get this working ourselves. So we're basically debugging the tests themselves and not the test infrastructure.
I can.
Yeah, and past releases.
Downgrade test. It's not too hard.
Also, as another argument against, a lot of the changes for the for upgrades rely on test infra changes, which aren't necessarily tied to the main repo. Also, some of the test infra changes or the main repo changes we need for upgrade tests need to be cherry picked anyway into old upgrade releases. So even if we lifting code freeze doesn't impact our ability to do test infra changes and get the tests running again, it just impacts if we observe actual errors, that it will be harder to cherry pick the fixes of those errors into the release.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's any other pros for extending the code freeze? Okay. So arguments against 1 week delay in the 1.9 release cycle is much more impactful due to all the holidays in it. So losing a week of time with Signal on your code in a week is a really big deal in a already short release cycle.
So my question at the beginning was actually about this one. So it doesn't seem that we have much impact on the release cycle itself. The impact mostly is on development in the main repo.
That is correct.
You need to fix upgrade tests anyway. It doesn't matter if we have the code freeze or not. And if we go with any of the points in the favor of this, it could actually help the release cycle, not delaying it.
Actually, that's a really good point. I think one risk of not doing this is that come December for 1.9, when there's a bunch of people out and vacations and holidays and stuff, we are in the same situation we are now with like smaller staff and KubeCon deadline.
Okay, I just noted that. Okay, so I'm going to put a sub-bullet to this against that it may not actually be an inhibitor. May be an enabler. Okay. Release team had an opportunity at the beginning of this release to factor a longer code freeze in, knowing this was already a problem, but did not. Doing this late in the cycle is disruptive. Anybody want to?
I 100% second that. I say this somewhat grumpily as somebody who thought we, the release team, had the mandate to push back really hard that, look, if the tests aren't passing, we don't cut bits. But we broke that. We did it. We cut a broken alpha 0, 1, 2, 3. We cut beta 0 with failing tests. We cut beta 1 with failing tests.
Yeah.
What gives us the right to throw up our hands now and say, but this time is different? We've had all the warning in the world from David McMahon saying, like, hey, guys, we actually can't find a passing a build that passes all of the green tests. Like the script that does that started running unbounded, so we actually had to cap it off. Like, we've had all the warning in the world to do something about this, and why? What gives us the right to change our minds now?
Yeah,
I'd
anybody
say
want to speak to that?
I'm not, well, a couple of points I guess I'd make. One, like, to what extent that's true, it doesn't change the impact of us cutting, right? It's like kind of like, why did we get into this state, which is a great like post-mortem or retrospective piece, but like the end result that we're going to be in 1.9 doesn't change. Whether I don't think changes just because we screwed up.
Okay.
It's sort of why I try to reframe it, at least in my head, in terms of risk mitigation, because there's no way we can catch everything here. It's, do we feel that there's enough effort we can put in to identify enough of the showstoppers that this would be significant? Because the reason it's significant now is because big marketing rah-rah, public fanfare and stuff that goes along with this. Cutting a beta, like, we didn't have the cost, the reputation hit for cutting alphas and betas, right? That's the additional impact here.
But it's not clear to me either that if we just chose not to cut an alpha, that anything would have changed. Like, how would that, if we had chosen not to cut those, would we be in a better situation today?
I think the only impact would have been if people knew that we weren't cutting them because the release was inherently had some instability in it, which I don't think we even know that we can say that. For all we know right now, that the release is 100% healthy, and these are all just ephemeral, non-deterministic, test infra, a lot of false signal. We don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would have used it like blowing past alpha deadlines as warning signs, and then I would have said we actually push back with the beta. So until like the rest of the release schedule, the further we push out the beta, the further the release schedule gets pushed out. But we blew through those too.
Well,
so if I hear you guys correctly, that you mean we should have pushed earlier for this, and I completely agree with that. We should definitely push earlier in the release process than later. Again, I see it as a post-mortem item.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it doesn't change the state that we are in right now.
And I don't think this is entirely fair because, like, I have been pushing on this personally since day one, since the second that code was open for 1.8. And Sen has been working on this with me, and Eric got engaged, I think, months ago. I don't think we were unaware of the issue or just like decided not to do anything about it.
Yeah,
right.
Understand. I'm strongly for this, but I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Me too, because sure. we have to represent the whole community's interest here, and this is tricky because this is going to impact a lot of lives and a lot of people's roadmaps. Okay, so we got some really good post-mortem stuff here. I'd also like to add that one disruptive thing about having release teams change every release is that you can have the best post-mortem in the world, but unless you've had direct experience with a lot of this stuff, it's just hard to know. Like when I was reviewing the 1.8 timeline, I mean, I knew that upgrade tests were a problem to some extent because we had talked about it in the retro, but I didn't know it was this, you know what I mean? So if I could go back and rewind time, I would have said, man, we need to factor in more time for this code freeze, specifically because the upgrade test can't fully be realized until we actually have the release branch to play with and know what the release upgrades look like. So
yeah, a shorter code freeze was predicated upon us basically having passing tests by now. So the fact that the tests are status quo resulting in code freeze being status quo is unsurprising to me. Let's not beat this dead horse.
Yeah, no.
I didn't understand the point about having the release branch because we saw the upgrade test failure on master anyway, and we didn't expect them to fail less or more when we cut the branch. I think one good post-mortem item here could be we should have a criteria for upgrade tests in one step of the release, maybe in the before this, some criteria we don't have any. It's just like green could be one criteria. It could be really hard to achieve, but something that Adam says on the document was good too. Like, we know exactly what upgrade tests are failing and who is responsible. We should have a list for that before we move forward in the release process, earlier than this, lifting code freeze.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and maybe we have the notion of a code pause in the middle of the release cycle for a few days or something, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do to solution this, because we're not necessarily the release 1.9 team. I mean, we might wind up being the release team, but we need to capture that and try and convey that information.
And Jace, those are all really good points. On the piece about like the switching release teams causes contributes to this sort of thing, I cannot agree with you more. And that's why we have the stipulation that the release manager, when possible, should be someone who's actually been on it before. But I mean, I have absolutely no regrets. I think you've probably done as good as any human could possibly do a job, but that was our intention there, was to try and address that.
For sure. Yeah, and honestly, I came so late into it because Maru had to drop out, that I was not I didn't have a lot of visibility into the pre-work, like the schedule and whatnot. So there's more to say there, but
you got put in a harder situation than you probably should have been put in, I guess.
That's right. I love it. This is great. So, all right, so let's move on.
I want to give us one more objective data point in the argument for. I'm just looking back at the release 1.7 notes, and it looked like the day before we were deciding whether or not to lift freeze, there were 25 open issues and 25 pending PRs. We have about double that number in terms of issues right now.
I also want to throw one thing in. If we're not going to change, if we're not going to attempt to get things green and we're going to leave them as they are, which is something I can live with, I think it's required that we have a bank of people who can basically speak to the test results. I don't feel particularly confident doing that myself. So if the SIGs need to pony up one or two people who will be essentially be on call to take a look at a bank of test results and say, yeah, this actually is not a problem.
That's kind of what I was asking about last night. If we had a list of the failing tests, so we could start identifying SIGs to start looking at them and either say, this is a flake, this is a known issue, we've root caused it, or it needs to be fixed.
From that though, because just compiling that list is like a day's work. Actually, kind of, I'm not too sure people can do that every day to kind of see which things are failing now, which things are actually turn out to be flakes. If the test signal is going to be this muddy, we need more people actually looking at it. Well, I say this because I feel like I'm about to try and cut a release and, cut a beta tarball or something. I've got no idea if that thing's actually got serious problems in it because of the test results. And that's a difficult call I don't really want to have to make on my own.
We do have a pretty good list for the upgrade tests and EDE tests that we know are failing. Those are tagged on GitHub with particular labels. I'll link to them in the release notes or in this document. But as stated last evening, our issues are not around individual flakes or tests that are broken. It's around the infra itself is sort of failing, and the tests are failing to run or start.
Yeah, the problem is we have a lot of stale tests, and to the point that Adam says, it's good, if we get to that point that we have that failing list and we ask SIGs to tell us about those tests. I think we should be a little harsher there, if I say, and tell SIGs that if this is not important, if you say that we can proceed with the release with the tests, just remove them.
So this is about the time where I think, have started doing that in release burndowns in the past. we have SIG labels applied to every single issue that is in the 1.8 milestone. If we have failing tests or issues that aren't represented in those actual GitHub issues, we should create those GitHub issues and we should apply the SIG labels, and we should start using the GitHub queries that Jace has so lovingly crafted along with specific labels for SIGs and go start chasing them down. My suggestion would be to maybe, well, one thing I started was to go talk to SIG Scalability, since they have a release blocker item right now, and we're trying to determine if that's really a release blocker. So maybe as a short list, I would take a look at all of the issues that have release blocker and find two SIGs, 3 SIGs, get a representative from each of them to show up to Release Burndown meetings. I would give everybody a heads up that that's starting in an informative email sent out to Kubernetes Dev today. And maybe just if you know who you would yank in to talk to some of these things, maybe give them a heads up today. But I absolutely agree. We have usually had representation from problem child SIGs, so to speak. And so we have the technology, we have the labels, we have the queries. We should be able to use these.
Okay.
Does that sound right to others who've been in this and in these meetings in the past? I guess maybe I'm looking at Phil or Liggett or Robbie.
Sorry, just to repeat that back was go track meet with the individual SIGs based on the issues in the milestone that are marked as blockers.
Yeah, I think we were using Sappho for 1.7, right? And we were going through and triaging. We had that graph broken down by SIG label, who has the most open issues in the milestone right now, and then and go get somebody from the SIG with the most amount of labels and start bugging them, and get somebody from that SIG to show up and give a status report at this meeting about what was being done to actively work that. Another way of trying to shortlist it would be take a look at the list of issues that have the release blocker label applied to them, and go find which SIGs own those, and then pull somebody in and say, hey, this is a release blocker. What's going on with it?
Yeah, I think at this point, last release, every issue in the milestone had a SIG associated with it, at least one, and we were kind of tracking, it was questionable whether the ownership boiled down to individual people, and that was kind of something that came out in the postmortem last time, but at least it was at the SIG level, so you had leads able to look and say, all right, what is expected to be fixed by us or moved out of the milestone.
And I'm not trying to discount the upgrade test failures. I'm just trying to drive us towards the issues do have SIG labels, so we can use this. And so if test failures are the problem and we don't have those represented as GitHub issues, we should make GitHub issues for those. But I want to see I'm trying to maybe drive us to the next point, which is the number of issues in the 1.8 milestone has not changed at all since Wednesday, or at least the number of release blocker issues has not changed at all.
Right, because what was brought up, if we delay code or we keep code freeze for another week, but we don't have specific issues that specific people are looking at during that week, nothing will be different a week from now. So,
exactly.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it so extending this release? If we are extending the freeze, opens up a whole implicit bucket of work that doesn't. I mean, it exists right now, but it's a different. Maybe not. Maybe it's not different actually. I guess the difference is really: are we going to be cherry picking stuff back, or are we going to be fast forwarding? In a nutshell.
I mean, there is. I know it's really vague, but I have found that opening up the master branch does create unknown works. I mean, it's kind of known at this point, some of this stuff, but examples I'd give are a new big PR that's been waiting, gets merged into master when it opens up, and that breaks master in a different way, right? And then now that creates noise and confusion, or the submit queue gets blocked up because there's 100 PRs that have been sticking around waiting for it, right? And not that we shouldn't do it, but it does create some work.
It also fragments the people that are working on it to fix. Is it more important to fix the 1.8 branch, or is it more important to fix master? And you might have the same people tasked with fixing both branches.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've
I-
heard a pretty good pro and con list so far. Was that you, Mehdi?
Yeah, I said something that I think I lost in the discussion. I want to be clear about that. So we said that we want to actually at some point we'll have a list and we'll go and talk with the seg leads to see if we can actually proceed with this failing or flaky tests for the release. I wanna emphasize that we should not tell them that you can proceed. We should tell them that you should remove it from the release blocker if you think it's okay to release with a flaky test or a failing test. It shouldn't be in the release blocker. We should try to push toward having greens, even if that means removing the tests that we don't care about or SIGs don't care about.
That's a really good point. A failing test should mean the code's broken. It shouldn't mean, well, I don't know, try it.
Right. Well, and this is something, in all my spare time I've been trying to work on is a release blocking and merge queue blocking policy proposal, and that there would actually be some sort of bar that people have to pass in order to get things in that state into that level of importance.
So I'm just looking through the release blocker issues, and it seems like SIG scalability is pinged on at least 2 of them. API machinery is pinged on 2 of them. I can get a representative from SIG scalability to show up and talk about what's going on Monday. Can somebody take care of getting somebody from API machinery to show up?
I can ping the team. I'll look at those release blocker and ping the team. Yeah, SIG machinery, API machinery, I mean.
Yeah, because I think, they might actually be related to SIG scalability as well. So might be able to get a couple birds with this done.
Okay, I'm putting you both down as to-dos on this. Because regardless, it doesn't matter what we decide right now, that's absolutely got to happen, right? That's regardless. Okay, so just a quick talk about some mitigation here. So if nobody is actually committed to do the work on this moving forward, then we're in kind of a bit of a we're no different if it's unfrozen or frozen in some ways. Although I would say that based on Mehdi's very good point that and others that this could actually become chasing other squirrels if we open master. So that may not actually, we may be better served by not increasing our scatter count. It may be better just to focus on this work that we have at hand. SIG participation levels. We've already, thank you, Eric, for outlining that we do have actually some lists of things there that can be hunted down. And Adam, you had mentioned in a private conversation that I had asked you to look into possibility of committed resource on the Google side. Is there any additional headcount that we can apply to this effort, or anybody that we can divert to this work that isn't already on it? Or how do we ensure that people who are on it stay on it?
I was given a hint that it could be, I could make a request, get it escalated and kind of get it acted on for like a handful of people. It's not impossible. There was also, the question was posed, is this an area that actually the community whole should be lifting rather than being a Google specific thing? And I kind of like, on one hand, yes, on the other hand, Google is part of the community. So I don't know how that gets traded off exactly. But I think there was a resistance to this turning into a Google only activity kind of a thing, where Google's expected to get all the tests to be green.
So I think my feeling on that is that there are a number of things that are Google only in the test machinery. And those specific things I just want to make sure that we have the resources there to handle that.
The test machinery, totally, I get what you're saying.
When anything outside of that, I don't think that's 100% Google responsibility, but because of the way that the test, the Kubernetes and other stuff is set up with the app engine, we're reliant on that. So if that becomes a blocking factor, right? So what I want to make sure is that we're not, rallying everybody in the world to work on this, and then Google has nobody to actually dedicate to the things that we can't touch. So if there's a commitment there that the people will be able to help us with that underlying infrastructure stuff, then that's a huge win. And it seems like that's the case. I just don't want to assume it because it's a community project. So,
and one thing I'll add to that, I think that's really important, Jace, and that means that like the people, like getting 4 random head counts from Google would not be accomplishing that goal. It's
right.
like people with a specific background.
Right. So that essentially becomes the ask, I guess. And maybe the bill cop or whoever's on call is enough for that, but I mean, I feel like we're going to be leveraging them. We're going to oversubscribe them rapidly, probably. So, so our commitment, if we do this, if we do extend, is we need to do everything on a community scale to augment the Google resources.
Apologies, I'll just have a quick offline conversation. I'm going to try and escalate internally to ensure that the Google-owned test infrastructure, like the whole Jenkins, Prowl, kind of world, has got enough eyeballs on it to try and get it stable. And I appreciate it's not been stable over the past few days, and that's actually one of the big problems.
Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic.
I'm currently testing run call, so I'm going to ask more help from our team. Just,
you've been doing an awesome job, Sen. You've been really responsive. But this is there's definitely a lot of 7-layer burritos of sadness happening.
I'll give a more update later.
Okay.
That section. Yeah.
Thanks. All right. I'm going to assume that we have. Let me look at the current attendee list for a second here. Let's see. Let me stop sharing. If I can figure out where the heck the button is for that. Zoom when you're sharing your screen, not a winning UX.
Jace, if you alt-tab back to Zoom itself and then kill it, maybe.
Got it. All right. And also, there's been chat things happening that I totally did not see, and my apologies for that. All right, back to the reality here. So we have so me, Jordan, Sen, Adam, Aaron, Dan, Eric Chang. Some people I don't know the GitHub. Foxish, Nick, Philip, Robert Bailey. Okay, this feels like enough of a quorum of people and leaders in the community to make a decision on this. So what I would like to say is let's vote on whether we extend code freeze to next Friday or not. Next Friday, assuming that we do push this off, would be we'll follow your playbook that you had, Adam, that you had aligned in the document a couple of meetings ago. Is that okay with you?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
So you had outlined when we were planning to lift code freeze, there was basically a playbook that you had written down. At X time we'll do this, X time we'll do that.
Yep.
The proposal is that essentially we're postponing those activities until a week from today, at the time frames that you specifically called out.
Yeah.
That is exactly the proposal. That means that the enforcement of the 1.8 milestone, all that stuff, stays in place, and we may augment the current restrictions by adding a cherry pick process or something like that. But right now, we can assume that the base level of extension is as it is exactly right now.
Yeah.
So
that's a fine way.
Okay. So is there anybody opposed to this?
Go.
Okay, then it's done. We're going to have a very difficult conversation with the community, and by we mean I will do it.
Are we going to be changing the cadence of Release Burndown meetings to daily, or are we sticking with every other day next week?
They're currently scheduled for daily.
Okay, daily sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think we're going to need that.
Yeah, let's do it daily.
If I can make a suggestion, as part of announcing the extension of the freeze, a week is kind of it's like a vaguely long period of time that makes you feel like you should be able to get stuff done, but actually goes by really quick. Like
yes.
Outlining what are we going to do like tomorrow, today, to start driving these down, so that a week from now we actually have a chance of opening it back up. Like outlining, like today, this is what we're going to do. So people don't just think, oh, well, we're going to, a week from now, I'll start trying to merge my stuff again. But they're thinking, no, I need to help drive these things today, tomorrow. So
that is a splendid suggestion, Jordan. Thank you. I will absolutely do that. I may need some help, and I'll solicit this in the release channel as we draft up that comm and that schedule, because there's probably activities in there that I'm not aware of because I'm not deep in the test infra. So I will create a document, we'll edit it throughout the rest of today and get that ready, and I will send it. And there's an implicit schedule that we will provide to the community at that point.
And
if the document I wrote Jace help, I can make you an editor there, or you can start a new one. I don't care.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out. And so was that you, Philip, that was saying something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, not to undermine how hard of a message this will be to deliver, but it's a message that the community has heard before. So, and they've tended to be accepting of it. Or we have.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the consumer experiences versus the dev experience in this stuff. Because most of the work that I did prior to the Microsoft world was implementation, not actually coding on the Kubernetes itself. So, okay, so we're gonna draft a document with the sort of the messaging on this and the schedule, and we'll go from there. Thank you everybody for that. So. That means next week, I'm going to adjust the timeline. Monday, obviously, we're not cutting 1.90 alpha. Change that to Friday. What are we going to do about the release candidate then? When is that going to happen? Monday?
I mean, if we've cleaned everything up, actually, am I muted? No, if we've cleaned everything up, as advertised, and we relax things on Friday, we could even cut the release candidate on Friday. We do the whole thing in one big chain.
Okay.
That's not impossible, I don't think.
That would be a good concession, because that would be only really 3 days of impact in terms of evaluation time for the release candidate. So that would be good.
Lady, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think as you said, it depends on which goal we hit. If we hit the goal of all green upgrade tests, yes, we can do that. If not, and with the goal, and I think this should be defined, like what's the goal and what's the minimal thing we want. The minimal thing I guess is having the list of failed and people responsible for it. If we didn't hit the all green, we may not be able to cut the release candidate, I guess. But if we could make everything work, then yes, we should definitely.
On the other side of the spectrum, I would argue that pushing back a week means we're pushing everything back by a week, and better to overpromise and underdeliver on schedule delays rather than having to continually kick the can down the road.
So that's a really good question, though. What is the material impact to the rest of the release cycle if we do this? I mean, does it have to be that week, or does it? mean, because what we're changing from a release evaluation perspective is we're delaying the first release candidate by 3 days.
Well, I suppose it depends on how active the community has been or will be in beta testing versus release candidate testing. In theory, for us, release candidates should be identical almost bit for bit to the release, and some of that time can and has been used as buffer in the past. And so we may find, I guess, like the shorthand version is it's too early for us to tell. We don't even know what we don't know right now, which is partially why we're recommending we're kicking out by a week. And so the initial tentative plan is everything will get pushed out by a week, but we will evaluate this as to code freeze or something.
And just to be
Yeah, I second that.
just to be concrete, I put in the doc that the goals are for us to get update tests running again. After that happens, we can go and identify individual failures and sort of make a call, hopefully earlier in the week, to determine what Friday looks like. And possibly doing manual downgrade tests. I know that was a concern of ours, but I don't know if that is the aim for next week.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely something. Now that we can't unknow about it, so we have to do something there. I'm having heartburn over pushing the release date off a week.
I wouldn't ripple the delay until we have cause. Because what we're saying is we're pushing this out and therefore ripple everything out and then maybe bring it back in. Like that just seems like a lot of wasted motion, potentially wasted motion.
I'm feeling that way myself.
There's always the potential for something to release, right? Like if we don't get there, then we will have to ripple it out, and that has to be understood. But I think it's premature to say, therefore, the whole schedule slips definitively.
Yeah, actually, I'd say that this has kind of the opposite. It's like we are doing this to make ourselves more effective at finishing off the tasks that need to be done. Not doing this would have a higher likelihood of slipping the.
Yes,
in my opinion.
You just encapsulated what I was thinking perfectly, but couldn't articulate. What I would like to do is ask for forgiveness if we have to.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I will be very clear in this rather lengthy email that I'm going to send out, is that this does have implications in terms of release timing, but we're going to make our best effort to put the release out at the earliest responsible moment and go from there. Okay. Again, thank you everybody for this very good discussion. I feel like if somebody comes back and watches this after the fact, that they'll definitely understand, that this was not something we chose lightly, because it would have been easy to just say, sure, why not? So thank you. Metrics review, let's go through that real quick. We already talked about the number of open issues is horrendous. It's 63. While that's down 2, that is not very much of a change week over week. Well, release meeting over release meeting, rather. Release blocking issues remains constant at 7. That's worrisome because that has not changed over a period of days. Critical issues are up by 1. The other markers are basically remaining more or less steady. There are now 2 important soon PRs out and one critical still. Submit queue has 4 failing tests. The dreaded 1.8 dashboard has 27 failing. We know about those. And so basically I put the status for the metrics review in red simply because of the number of issues. I think that's a pretty clear indicator that we're not in a good state. Branch updates, branch health. There's probably not really anything to say there, is there, currently? No. Build failures we're diagnosing. Test infra updates. I believe this is Eric. Do you mind speaking to this? And also letting me know if you think it's red, yellow, green.
Eric had to step out. I kind of wanted to defer to Sen for the test infra stuff.
Oh, okay.
Like talk about all the issues happen. So first is Jenkins run out of disk space last morning. I think from yesterday night, and that's got fixed like last morning. Not the day before yesterday and fixed yesterday last morning. So actually SummitQ is still working and merging things. But Pro started to getting node pressure, and since Pro cluster is still on 1.6, I think, and so the node scheduler will kick out of test pod rather than like deleting finished pod. That means a EDE job can run halfway and get rescheduled on another pod and like start over from the beginning, and they are never finished. I'm looking into this with Node team, and temporarily I'm adding more Node to Pro, see if that can fix things. I think Aaron might find the root cause is because we don't immediately clean up finished pod anymore, and that change getting like a week ago, and now it started piling up and resulting in some disk pressure in Pro. I'm doing some manual garbage collection now, see if that can mitigate the issue, and we probably need to revert that offending PR and redeploy like every component. I hope to get it stabilized hopefully soon, like noonish, so that we can start getting good testing signals over the weekend.
Great. Sen, I know Aaron said it before, but I also want to iterate. Thank you so much for all of your hard work on this. You're doing an amazing job in a very difficult situation.
If there's anything I can do to help on the outside, let me know. I'm just sort of trying to follow along and dig up stuff as I find it.
Yeah, it was mostly Joe was out for a couple of days, and yeah, we cannot find the Pro manager in our team.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to add in terms of the test infra and all that?
There's one other thing I'll raise, which I don't know if it's blocking or not, but I just noticed that the Munch GitHub API token usage jumped up about a day and a half ago, 2 days ago. It's not super critical, but we might find that the submit queue starts to act a little slower than usual until we can diagnose what's going on there. So more of a warning, nothing critical yet.
Okay. So documentation and marketing, Jennifer put an update in here, which is basically docs are at a yellow state, 7 open PRs against 1.8 milestone, a few still needing both tech and docs LGTMs, and there may be a lingering PR2 not marked properly. So that actually doesn't frighten me too much, because that's actually not bad. I think that's about on par where we've been in prior releases. They seem to be all over that, so that's good. Release notes, Radek and Jennifer following up with SIGs to identify SIG-specific themes. Good. Expand or clarify missing content and specific release notes. That's good. I went through this morning and updated the spreadsheet with release notes equals true and merged equals true. So most of the things that I found there, there were mistakes. They shouldn't have actually had the release notes set to true, because they were actually tied to an issue and a bug fix. So it doesn't look like we're increasing the amount of PRs getting merged that need documentation, which is good, because if they were, then we would have a problem, because that would indicate that people are merging features, and which should definitely not be happening anyway. All right, so lastly, oh man, we're over time. I'm sorry, everybody. Time got away from me. Anything before we call it? All right, Great. Thank you, everybody, so much. I'll handle comms. We'll follow up in the SIG Release channel, and have a fantastic weekend and the great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.
Happy Friday.